Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today I have the continuation for Gaiomon being the original Greymon, and I just want to thank you guys so much. This is Thanksgiving Day, and I want to thank you guys so much for watching. This is Giving Week, and I'm giving back to you guys for watching and enjoying everything. But as always, we're still on the race to 100 subs, so please join along if you can. But more importantly, this is a theory I had no idea was going to blow up. It's actually probably my best watched video. So I'm just happy maybe the algorithm liked it, or maybe you guys just enjoyed it and really wanted to watch it. But yeah, the love for Gaiomon is really cool because he's one of those Digimon that I think kind of gets left behind always when we're talking about the Greymon family. And if not for the card game, we probably wouldn't see it that much, to be honest. But luckily, we've seen it twice. It's really cool. And also, we get to see some of the more unfocused Greymon Digimon take the spotlight. Still waiting for Victory Greymon, but he will appear in this theory. So I'm happy, you guys. Let's just get into it quickly because I need to have a lot to talk about because I've done a lot of research and there's a lot of things we need to talk about that is going to be a little bit up to interpretation, but also in most of it's just basically what the wiki has and also like all the data I could get off of Digimon.net, which is like the official website. So I tried to grab as much information as I could that was like canon and non-canon to some degree because I just wanted to see what was there. But yeah, we are there. So I'm going to need to dispel some misconceptions first. So let's jump straight to it. So first, one of the comments I got was the X antibody being present means that, you know, obviously something like Gaiomon couldn't exist because in belief of the time that the X program has existed, that would mean that any Digimon prior would not have it. So this is an easy one to dispel based solely on the fact that we have a few things that go against this. Now, when it comes to the prototype Digimon, they're all natural carriers. So effectively, this means that the X program or the X antibody was already implanted in them probably from their design point, which means the X program most likely has existed for, I guess in the digital world's time, like eons. I'm assuming Yggdrasil has access to the X program whenever it feels like it, which is kind of terrifying if you really think about it, where Yggdrasil literally could just nuke the digital world whenever it feels like it, effectively with the X antibody or with the X program. So pretty much, I just need to dispel that just because the X program takes place in the future, or it does not mean that X antibody Digimon did not exist in the past. We have another Digimon that I'll talk about later, which is basically the focal point as well for this theory. It is an X antibody wielder, and it has apparently existed since the creation of the Dark Area, and that means we're going back in time, not even just my theory in the actual digital world. So I had to dispel that one first because that one's an easy one to talk about because it's kind of obvious that it's not true. But yeah. Okay, and then I need to explain what I meant by the original Greymon because I think a lot of people are probably misunderstanding what I meant. So effectively what I meant, because even in the last video, I'm saying that it's not the original Greymon in terms of design, because obviously Greymon came first because that was what the Digimon creators made. When I'm talking about original in this specific context, we're talking about the original as created by like Yggdrasil or Yggdrasil's intended, intentions here. So like what Yggdrasil wanted to make. And effectively, it's a weird thing because I'm like, obviously Yggdrasil is a character inside of the digital world, but it's also like the actual like host computer that we usually focus on or the digital being that takes life and focuses on like being the god of the Digimon. So, that's what I mean. Cause I'm obviously, yes, like I'm not going to just dispel that saying like, oh, Gaiomon was the first. If you don't see like a 1992 or 91 picture of Gaiomon, then yeah, it doesn't exist because like Digimon's that old. But point aside, that's what I meant by original, guys. What Yggdrasil intended, not necessarily what we actually have on like paper. And let's just get to it because we have to get to the elephant in the room because obviously this one's going to be the most prominent one. And believe it or not, guys, I have a lot of evidence that basically backs up my claim to prove that this claim isn't necessarily true. So we'll get into it. So first is obviously going to be Ancient Greymon coming first. So this is basically just saying that since Ancient Greymon existed in the past, it was the progenitor of the Greymon species. So, obviously I drew the Venn diagram for you guys here. And as always, everybody, or some people that I just showed the video to that didn't even comment, they were just like, yeah, that's obvious, right? Like he came first. He's Ancient Greymon. And like, yeah, he's the original. And then, but I was like, well, that's not necessarily true there, buddy. And they're like, what do you mean? Because he's the original. And I said, well, the first thing came to mind, why isn't he just called Greymon? It's like, what do you mean? Because we have a few things. So first, obviously, I'm going to do the same thing for Gaiomon. Of course, it's not called a Greymon. Because obviously it can't just be Greymon because it didn't exist before Greymon, or at least we didn't discover it first. So that's where I'm going to also talk about that. As obviously a lot of these Digimon aren't named after their originals. Like ancient Garurumon should just literally be called Garurumon. But we don't do that because obviously these Digimon have existed before them and there's maybe some ties to them. So, just putting that out there first. But it's in the bio of Ancient Greymon that really kind of changes it for me. So when it says the abilities of Ancient Greymon would later be inherited by the Greymon species and other Dragon Digimon, when I found out on Digimon.net, there's a few things here. So it's like, yeah. So if you wonder why, what am I talking about? He's not the first Greymon. Ancient Greymon was not the first Greymon. And the first word that usually gives it away is when it said later. Because what this would mean is that Greymon as a Digimon must have existed sometime in the distant past, prior or alongside the fact that ancient Greymon would exist. So the lineage already existed. Before its sacrifice, the Greymon species must have existed somewhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to inherit the power. Now, people could argue, well, there would also be Digimon that would have come later that would have obviously carried in the power and the ability to use fire during the future, which is true, but there's a problem. For there to be the Greymon species mentioned during this period, instead of just saying Digimon would later inherit it, instead of saying the Greymon species, that's what you would just say. You would just, obviously the bio could just say it was passed down to the dragon species Digimon, and pretty much we have it there. But in this case, it specifically mentions the Greymon species, meaning they must have already existed. Which is exactly what I was thinking, is that maybe Greymon already existed but didn't have any powers of fire. And that's when it came to this conclusion for me for this theory, which is, why can't both be true? And I actually have a great way to explain this, a few things. First, going into my Venn diagram, if you really think about it in this way, both of them being true doesn't negate anything. And it doesn't mean either or could be bad. And my reasoning is this. When we look at the actual things that both of them possess that make them unique, we actually have some pretty interesting things. Now, for Ancient Greymon, it has the power of fire, obviously. It's a beastly/dragon dinosaur, obvious. Sharing a similar head to the Greymon species or lineage. And then vice versa for Gaiomon. It's more humanoid. It wields weapon and tech. It has similar heads. But it also possesses the menacingly strange gray hair that Greymon is usually known for, because Greymon actually in its name is stood for old, like old, or used like as an old Digimon, basically, like old Mon is basically how you'd read it. But what I'm thinking is, if that is the case, what if there was a possibility that someone got Greymon's name from seeing the gray hair off of Gaiomon? So I wasn't able to talk about that in the 5-minute theory. I kind of just put that in one of the slides. But yeah, pretty much that's what I was thinking, is maybe someone saw the gray hair. They took the name Greymon, and because the lineage is super old, you have an old Digimon that at one point they saw them with gray hair. So yeah, but moving into the next thing that's important, we have basically the tie-ins to each of the lineage of Greymons and how data could work in the digital world. So first and foremost, Greymon would share a little bit more characteristics with Ancient Greymon, effectively being more the beastly dinosaur. It takes into inspiration from the ability that it can use fire in the same way, and it has that sizing. Although one thing that's interesting is that Ancient Greymon's characteristics, except for its head, aren't really related to the Greymon species. And people could argue with me all day about it. I mean, we still haven't seen a quadrupedal Greymon yet. That's the thing also I want to bring up. We haven't seen a quadrupedal Greymon, which is actually kind of interesting that we don't have one. But, that's also something I had to dispel. Is like, that's the thing, is Ancient Greymon in name is more similar to Greymon, whereas Gaiomon is more similar morphologically with the way it looks, the way it's designed, but it just doesn't share the name. So, that's another thing to talk about. But also, when we finally move into something like War Greymon, I mean, come on, you look at it and it looks so much more like Gaiomon and than Ancient Greymon. It's almost ridiculous, except like even the aspect of hair. It's just, yeah, it has yellow hair. the red hair. And then Greymon has its hair, and then you look at Gaiomon, it's like, yeah, Gaiomon is obviously the more humanoid one. So this leads me to believe both can be true. And how this would work is obvious. When ancient Greymon died, or finally passed down its power, all the Greymons received their fire abilities. However, due to Gaiomon existing sometime maybe prior, this allowed them to actually take on the more humanoid ability. And when I get into the next part of the theory to explain how I think everything came to be for Gaiomon, this would be important because it would give the data that would allow us to have Digimon like, obviously, War Greymon, Black War Greymon, even something like, what is my blinking? You know, basically the size thing. Even Brigadiermon, the new Commandramon D Brigade Digimon, takes inspiration from this more humanoid focused body that is like the best game plan for the Greymon species. And my reasoning for it making more sense is the more you digivolve up the Greymon line, they start to lose more of this focus on being beasts and using the raw firepower. They focus on like adapting into weapons, tech, making them more skilled, more useful. And this is where I think Gaiomon, the War Greymons, they all start to shine in that aspect because they share this ability to utilize weapons, tech, to enhance their power, to utilize their firepower more effectively. Yes, the Gaia forces are still there, but it almost seems that they're tempered by the abilities of the War Greymons to use their Draymon destroyers, almost to focus it out, to allow them even more abilities to fight in close hand-to-hand combat. So basically, that's why I have both of these existing. Maybe Gaiomon's data existed in the digital world, and wherever it's been, because I'm assuming that from at least my logic, Gaiomon is somewhere in the digital world trapped, and it finally woke up from ice, which would be explained in the card arts for it in Gallantmon where they're doing battle, which is, you know, Gaiomon was asleep for so long, it woke up, it didn't know where it is, and it figured out it's back in the digital world, and Gallantmon was afraid of it, so they ended up battling. And you realize that it's on par with a royal, or basically at that point either a Royal Knight or just a very strong Holy Knight Digimon, a Mega level. And basically, Ancient Greymon could still have existed as well, and both of them could do the same thing for both lineages, giving both sides the ability to have the power of fire, some of the morphological similarities, but also being able to give both of them the best of both worlds. Absolutely raw firepower from the abilities to use from something like Ancient Greymon, but being able to harness them, turning them into weapons, tempering their abilities, and making them more suitable for battle and combat in the form of something like Gaiomon. So, you know, guys, that's what I have for that part. And that's basically like just where I wanted to spell it, because both could be true. That's how I'm looking at it, at least, because it would make sense. But we have to get into the part of the theory which is more important, which is the origins of Gaiomon, because I didn't go over this in the last video because it was a 5-minute theory, and I'm going to talk about where I think it begins. So first and foremost, we have to start off with where I think Gaiomon was designed for and what its purpose is. So effectively, I think Gaiomon, with the way it's designed, the way it appears, I like to believe that it was designed to take down something, because the way it's designed with its weapons, the way it's powered up, the way it can kind of fight, its ferocity, to my belief, it feels like Gaiomon was created to be a warrior, but a warrior for a purpose. That's why I think that Ygdrassil's design for Gaiomon is actually to be a hitman, being the one sent in to fight. And my best reason for this is what it's based off of. So Gaiomon is obviously samurai inspired. So to me, this means that it must have the same somewhat characteristics originally of a samurai. So I think it was loyal, and basically probably viewed Yggdrasil as its shogun, or lord in this case, if you guys understand that. So basically, I think that's how they were seen, and that's how Yggdrasil was seen by, you know, Gaiomon. Gaiomon was created, though, for a specific reason, and it ties back into the whole, you know, kind of X-program stuff, but not really, where we focus on kind of the experiments that Yggdrasil must have been doing, and we get finally tied into X evolution, but specifically X Death evolution, or Death X evolution. So Death X evolution in this world is a focal point for a few reasons. Is that Yggdrasil was experimenting on prototype Digimon, and one of the Digimon it created, being Dracmon, was being experimented on with Dex, or the Death X evolution. Many Digimon had just perished, so Digicores were laying around. But for one specific reason, one of the Dracmon actually did well. And for some reason, its body, instead of losing its will, retained. And the Death X evolution, which I will explain in a little bit, guys, but focus on the topic here, allowed it to evolve. And when it evolved, it absorbed the remaining Digicores of all the Digimon that had been experimented, turning it into Grand Dracmon. And Grand Dracmon, although albeit being alive and retaining some of its will, was completely, I'm just gonna go for it, like a little crazy, because Yggdrasil never intended for one of its creations to go this strong, which would obviously be a tie-in to Yggdrasil being kind of paranoid with how powerful and populated the digital world would be becoming. But Grand Dracmon's creation is due to the fact that Yggdrasil was doing too many experiments, and the data accumulated, well, turned Dracmon into this amazingly powerful and behemoth of a Digimon in Grand Dracmon. Now, Grand Dracmon and Yggdrasil would be okay for a while, as Yggdrasil would try to keep it in containment. Basically, where I'm assuming all the other prototype Digimon are, some type of place where they're in stasis. However, something occurred one day that would be difficult, as Yggdrasil would basically get ready to launch the digital world, and notice that something was happening to the experiments, as a lot of them were disappearing. And to Yggdrasil, it just kind of ignored it and eventually created the digital world. And as time would pass in the digital world, it started to realize more and more of the subjects were disappearing. More Digimon that were normally locked up in containment started to vanish. Now, as Yggdrasil would eventually investigate, it finally figured out what it was. It was Grand Dracmon. As because of the Death X evolution, Grand Dracmon needed Digicores, and it would get it no matter what, as it was stealing Digicores from specific Digimon. Now, one of the Digimon that it stole a Digicore from would be a sleeping Ryudomon, as although the Ryudomon had its Digicore taken, the Ryudomon's body remained, as almost for some reason, it seemed to still be alive. As Grand Dracmon would try to be stopped by Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil would watch as Grand Dracmon would flee through one of the portals that led to the digital world. And Grand Dracmon was now loose on the digital world to do as it must. As this would lead to calamity during the early digital world, as Grand Dracmon would arguably be one of the most powerful Digimon, except for maybe the Sovereigns and the 10 legendary warriors. So, already, this is a problem. Also, guys, with it existing, X-Antibody Digimon in the digital world at the ancient times doesn't mean that the X-Antibody spread around, as that's not how that process works. But, in their case, it doesn't really matter. It's just a really strong Digimon anyways. So Grand Dracmon would be causing problems. However, Yggdrasil itself didn't want to intervene, as it was hoping maybe the Digimon of the digital world would be able to do it. However, I think this is what leads into the basically sealment and the enragement of Fang Longmon. Because as we know, Fang Longmon has two entries where it gets sealed up by Lucemon, or it gets sealed up in any other capacity. So, effectively, the thing that would allow Lucemon to eventually lock up Fang Longmon would actually be, at least in my opinion, Grand Dracmon. As Grand Dracmon would enrage Fang Longmon by like maybe doing some experiments itself. I think that Grand Dracmon probably turns into some like evil type of character, thinking he's, you know, very smart, a scientist, like, oh, I'll do the experiments too because Yggdrasil made me and I'm gonna show it perfected X evolution. Or perfected Death X evolution. And it probably turns Fang Longmon into, it's like a dark form from the Digimon Survive. And effectively that happens. Lucemon comes down, ends the calamity by sealing it into the center area. The harmonious ones were barely able to survive the enraged Fang Longmon. And with Grand Dracmon stopping them as well. Basically, the war with the 10 legendary warriors would take place. They defeat Lucemon. And the digital world's in this state of limbo. But effectively, what I think would happen is, in this case, we would have this situation appear where there need to be something done, and Grand Dracmon's pretty much just being crazy and doing bad stuff. The dark area is already created, or becoming created as it begins, and effectively, in order to stop Grand Dracmon from causing more calamity, the Ryudomon that survived, although, you know, also having Digicore taken, would have one replaced in the form of the X-Antibody, a bigger one, also working as a Digicore given by Yggdrasil, as Yggdrasil would work on the body of this Digimon. As I do think that the best rookie to actually go in tandem with the first Gaiomon would actually be Ryudomon, as in Ryudomon's lore, we learn a lot, so I'll just read some of it off. But one thing I really like is this. So Ryudomon is basically the prototype Digimon, but it's more from this. During an experiment, the brazen combat data of military commanders and dragons from Japanese myth was said to be hidden in the deepest part of its Digicore, and it is supposedly grown into a mighty Digimon. Ryudomon uses its signature move, the Kabuto Geishi. Not really important, guys, but it's the weapon it has. But my reasoning would be this. The Ryudomon that was taken lost this Digicore. So in order to fix that Digicore in its body, Ygdrasil crafted a special one. One designed specifically for this Digimon, crafted by obviously the same ability it had before. So using military commanders as well as dragons. But something was added too. Ancient data. Data dating back to the time of the human, or whatever the humans had, which was like dinosaurs, which would give it this more powerful ability. As once the Digicore was given to Ryudomon, and it was given to it, its ability to evolve took place, as it would evolve into what I believe at least would be Virus, or at least this one, the blue Greymon that we see in X Antibody. After it awoke, it would wonder what was going on. However, Yggdrasil told it needed even more power, as I think an ultimate that would suit this Greymon isn't actually Metal Greymon, and I don't think the armor would take place yet. And I think X Antibody, specifically the X Antibody for this Greymon, allowed it to effectively grow and grow, as Yggdrasil told it would need more. As I think Yggdrasil specifically would have some maybe vendetta to like make this more powerful than a Grand Dracmon, so obviously it began to work on Greymon, and eventually Greymon would be armored up with more data, and with its ability, and retaining its ability of its blades from when it was Ryudomon, the Kobutogeshi would be turned into its two familial blades in the form of Gaiomon, and Gaiomon itself would be created. However, Yggdrasil wasted no time. As loyal as Gaiomon was, it was time to set it out on the world, and it would find Grand Dracmon and teleport Gaiomon there. A massive battle would ensue. However, the battle's result isn't what's important, it's what would end up happening, as I do believe that Gaiomon wouldn't be fully successful, as it originally attempted to defeat Grand Dracmon, but in the theory that I have, which would finally extend to the other parts of the digital lore for Grand Dracmon, is that Grand Dracmon wanted to go to the dark area, which is kind of morbid in its own way, but it didn't let Gaiomon defeat it. But it let Gaiomon think it was defeated by transporting it there. As effectively, the battle would be really hard fought, and Gaiomon, although seeming to be strong, was not enough, as both would fight to almost a standstill. However, I think what would occur is Gaiomon being forced to send Grand Dracmon to the dark area via some help of Yggdrasil, but Grand Dracmon would succeed by using its own attacks, like through Gorgon's Eye, and stole some of the memory data from Gaiomon, ripping away what it remembered and effectively leaving it in a state of unconscious memories, not remembering who it is. And then once Grand Dracmon was sucked into the dark area where it wanted to be, it would just smile, and Yggdrasil wouldn't know for a long time why. And in the case of Gaiomon, Yggdrasil is kind of a bad creation. So after it realized that Gaiomon had served its purpose, kind of just said, okay, here you go, here's freedom. It kind of just let Gaiomon on its own in the digital world, where I think Gaiomon would have a very similar story to Black War Greymon from 02, where it would wander the world trying to figure out its purpose. And at least for one of my theories, I think it would meet the ancient Digimon at the time before I think the Ice Age period takes place in the digital world. It would meet Hexablaumon, and Hexablaumon would obviously battle with it. They would be equally matched, but then, it would try to help it and they'd be friends, sort of. But then the ancient calamity would take place. Gaiomon would tell, obviously Hexablaumon to go, and obviously he'd be trapped in ice as he would be frozen over. And then so many years would pass by, lots of years, that the world would finally cool down. He'd eventually be free. He don't know where he is, counted by Gaiomon. Then they battle. And pretty much that's where that ends. So that's just my theory for Gaiomon, guys. I tried to do my best to find as much research as I can on this. I didn't just want to make it up, because there was a good amount of stuff, but there was also stuff that kind of conflicted with each other. Because if you look at the specific Digimon wiki, it talks about the inheriting power of ancient Greymon in a different context, where it's like it's more of it was passed down eventually to dragons, dinosaurs, and stuff like that. So maybe Greymon didn't exist. But if you read the Digimon.net, it specifically means the Greymon species had their powers enhanced by ancient Greymon, and vice versa, the dragon Digimon as well. So yeah, you gotta take it with a little grain of salt. I think it's more because there's no concrete things. But also, there's no concrete things for Digimon in general. So that's another thing that kind of makes me mad. That there's no clear explanation for a lot of things. It's kind of like, I don't want to give any spoilers, but if you look at the beginning movie, it has a lot of contradictions to like some other stuff. So, you know, it does and doesn't matter. It's just a part of an issue if you want like everything to make sense. But in my case, this is my best way to try to make this make sense to you guys. I really enjoyed making it. It was really fun. One of the things I thought was more interesting was the fact that there's a lot of random Digimon that have unexplored or unexplained lore. Like Grand Drachmon's one that I think it doesn't get enough justice because it's so ambiguously strange that you could just do so much with it. Like Grand Drachmon should have been like if there's like a leader of the seven great demon lords, it would be Grand Drachmon because it just has so much interesting stuff going about it that it would make sense. Like it sounds like an evil Batman, like hiding from the shadows and then coming out when it needs to do whatever it wants. So that's kind of where I view it. But also I view it as like at this point being an omnipotence force where it doesn't really care. Like that's the best way I see is it doesn't care at all. So that's the thing. It does whatever it wants because it wants to. I think it probably inherited that like mindset from something like Yggdrasil. So that's kind of how I view that, guys. That's kind of where I drew the basis of Grand Drachmon. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today, guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving on behalf of me and everybody else that you know. And take care, guys. Obviously, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. Tell me what you thought. And pretty much enjoy some food on me. Take care, guys. Join me tomorrow. More stuff's coming out. Enjoy Black Friday. And yeah, this is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.